how many projects fail due to the problems of knowledge sharing and the problems of disseminating that knowledge within the company. And in 84% of all projects is that they fail because their real-world impact is essentially prevented from having an impact by no proper knowledge management. And knowledge management literature shows us that there are three main challenges to overcome in knowledge management. Structural, organizational, and this is not covered by us in this paper. So these are structural issues of knowledge management that can lead to problems. It's not well archived and so forth. There are human issues and there are technical issues in knowledge management that we can overcome and that we're trying to overcome in this particular situation. So specifically for the second one, human-related knowledge management issues, we often have a lack of motivation to share implicit knowledge. Implicit knowledge is something that you learn on the job. Just like, how do I turn the knob on this particular fridge machine, whatever have you. How do I do a certain process of filtering, if I work in biochemistry, filtering certain bacteria or something like that, right? So a very specific hands-on information that this is just the best way to do it. This is the best way to run the filtration system. This is a lot of knowledge that people pick up on the job. And oftentimes, in this particular too, so my first job that I took, I was a Java programmer. Imagine, this was like the late 90s. I was, I think, 17 years old at that point. And so I came into a company and Java was the new big thing. It was like, oh my God, Java, this programming language is awesome. You can make all these amazing things. And so I'm just like, cool, I'm going to pick up Java. And I read a couple of books and I learned how to program in Java. And so there was this guy in the company that was essentially the programming guy. And he had done web development before and dabbled a little bit in JavaScript. And now he was learning Java. And he's like, I'm learning Java. I'm going to, be very inexpensive to this company at some point. And so I came onto the job. I already had some knowledge of Java, and I wrote some routines for him. And he got really upset how I made some of his work more efficient with the little subroutines that I wrote, because essentially he thought he had that standalone knowledge of that programming knowledge for the company that would secure his place. So a lot of people, think they have a certain bit of knowledge that really makes them invaluable for a company, and they don't necessarily want to share it, because if somebody else knows exactly how you do your job, that makes you expensible for the company. But that's also how big companies are run. They want to be able to replace people if they have to, and so that's a thing that companies want, but people generally do not want to lose their power and their position. So how do we overcome that? How do we make that meaningful and fun, that people can engage in that? So this was sort of the idea of how do we tackle the human-related knowledge management problems. But then, of course, there's also technical knowledge management problems. A lot of the knowledge management systems that we have are outdated. You just have to look at the larger companies like Siemens and so forth. You can see there's very traditional structures in, so you go this web-based tutorial that you have to sit through or something, and you have to acquire some of the knowledge. It's really quite painful actually to just read through bulks of text and make sense of them. And oftentimes the user experience is just not there. There might be a next button if you're lucky, but oftentimes it's just you have to actually look for where to click next and how to find all of the information that you want. And oftentimes it's so complex that you're getting presented with a lot of information, and then you have to judge which of this is actually useful for on-the-job tasks, which of this is useful for the actions that we do. So that's quite complicated. So our goal was essentially that organizational issues need to be addressed in knowledge sharing and learning, and we picked out the specific aspect for this paper about learning. How do people learn the knowledge that they need? So we're trying to build a gameful learning component of an enterprise knowledge management system. So we have this larger system that enables us to do knowledge management, and the paper that we wrote looked specifically at the learning aspect. Now, the system that we wrote is called Clever. It's a completely interactive front-end, web-based, built in Angular, that allows you to enter knowledge in it, interact with that knowledge in form of a trivia quiz, and then that trivia quiz is also tied into an overall movement of units in the game world. So how does the game world look like? This is kind of the regular interface that you have for Clever. So Clever motivates employees to interact with the system to learn from previously shared knowledge, but in this particular case, we see this serious game that we built for learning. So essentially, as you can see, it's a fantasy setting. Mind you, this was a software company, so different companies have probably different requirements of what kind of game they would want to play. In this particular case, Dominic, the student that built this game, quizzed I think he conducted a couple of interviews and an online survey to the company. What kind of setting would they prefer? Science fiction? Would they prefer medieval settings? What kind of game did they want to play? And it ended up being a medieval setting that they preferred the most, and this is why we chose this setting in this particular context. So you can see that it's always played by 4 different players. Every player starts in a different corner of the map, and then you have a hexagonal grid, which is what you see here. And you move across that grid, and you can pick up resources and fight the other units as you move along. Now, where do you get the resources to fight from? You get that from answering trivia questions. So you, in between, you have a little pop-up window that says, okay, now answer these questions about this particular knowledge. And then when you answer correctly, you get that information and hopefully feel okay. And so basically, for our particular study, now that we studied this game, again, we were looking into self-determination theory. Luckily, I've already presented self-determination theory in the keynote, so I don't need to do that again in this talk. But as you know, self-determination theory has different aspects: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And we were looking at these specific components. Now, we tend to call these components of a game motivational affordances. This is according to some of the research that Dieterling and others have done and published recently, where we're just looking what are the affordances motivationally that the game provides. And of course, the intrinsic ones are the ones from self-determination theory. So we looked at what aspects of competence does it provide. We had challenge, and this was evaluated, of course, initially with a couple of people playing the game. So we looked at providing challenge, immediate feedback on correct answers, strategic combat, domination points for eliminating enemy units, and learning. The next step was autonomy. Of course, we looked at, is there autonomy? Can you choose different races and units? We made that available. Strategic combat, so deciding who to attack and when. Choice of categories for trivia questions. As you can see, we didn't just have trivia questions from one big box, but we said you can choose which article you want to answer. Do you want to answer something about programming knowledge or graphics knowledge? This was a web design software company. So, of course, the questions fell into these categories. And then, of course, nonlinear gameplay. You could move wherever you want in that hexagonal world. Relatedness. Playing together with co-workers was enabled from the start. You could not play alone. You always had to have 4 people come together and play this game. You could help or challenge one another during gameplay. So you could say, I specifically want to play against player 2, or player 4 and player 1 want to combat each other. So you really fostered that relatedness. If you have, your specific enemy. Who was it this morning that said, my co-author, the one that I want to challenge? So essentially, you just pick the person that you want to challenge. And extrinsic motivation, of course, you got winning the game, domination points, losing points for incorrect answers, and social status. So all of these were available too. And so in our evaluation, essentially, we said we have got 9 participants. We did semi-structured interviews, and we checked with the intrinsic motivation inventory around different themes, whether or not these were addressed by the study. And essentially, the ones that I wanted to highlight specifically in this presentation, given the time, where perceived challenge depends on quality and quantity of the trivia questions. The participants felt that the game mechanics were pretty rewarding to them, and they felt that the game would be better to learn smaller things or to recap content rather than to learn something new and complex. So it's really good for these small, tiny units of game development where you want to learn these specific aspects. In future work, we want to look at gameful elements that support employees' intrinsic and extrinsic motivations to interact with the knowledge management system. Specifically, the evaluation study, the larger one that we did after this pilot, is still currently being summarized and will be published. And implementing the knowledge repository module will also incentivize employees to contribute with knowledge in form of trivia questions. This was interesting because the game that we built was just part of a larger knowledge management system. So we still face that problem of how do we actually get the content into the system, because now we have the dissemination problem solved and it works quite well, but we still need to solve the problem of making sure that the system has enough questions from all employees. And how do you incentivize that first step of putting the knowledge into the system? So thank you very much for your attention. I made it in time, hopefully. And